Recording in progress.
I have a warning as well that this session is being recorded. I think it's fair to warn you about that. So that is what is happening right now. Let me do a small introduction about the subject that we are going to discuss before introducing our panelists today. And I will do it, if I may, in Spanish, in order to be a little bit more agile.
As I was telling you, there is an important aspect in the presentation of this roundtable. I think that in general, when we talk about politics and sustainability, in the international framework, there is an approximity that is binary, in which you have the states and you have the cities in another part, and they can take part of this debate. No one can deny the importance of the cities and the states in the development of sustainable politics, because everybody knows that the implication of all the economic levels and the government levels is important. However, we are conscious that the territorial perspective on the sustainable development is important. It is, and we believe that there are some indicators. We are convinced that some recent indicators tell us this path. The OECD recognizes that the 65% of the objectives of sustainable development are not possible without the participation of the governments. The urban agendas, for example, are a tool that pretend to localize, situate the objectives for development in a physical environment or sector, to have a physical and territorial component. And at the same time, some Europe symptoms show that progressively the territorial dimension is every time more important. The agenda are ever more significant in the development, in the economic, social, and environmental, in a sustainable way, importance. It is already recognized that this dimension and factor in the urban fact, the territorial dimension. We come from a crisis. We are actually in a crisis moment in which the COVID and the pandemic has left its mark in everything that in all our government and society sectors. And I think that from COVID, what we can learn, or we can arrive to some conclusions. First of all, the health sector has been decentralized in many cases. It is true that at many government levels, it is true that they have participated in certain strategic decisions were taken from national governments, but however, the participation of the national governments with this optic that is more territorial or regional are the ones that have demonstrated their competencies in the health aspect of the pandemic. On the other hand, the urban concentrations have been especially places of getting spread this disease. The virus has spread here. There is a questioning of where the urban fact has been a factor in the COVID.
Sorry, we have some. Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. And finally, the digitalization, the telework, the decentralization of work from the pandemic crisis has opened new possibilities for the territories, the regions, to retain their human capital, to foster innovation. There is another crisis that we have to face, which is the climate crisis, in which the territorial factor, the allies and the partnerships between different actors will be fundamental. to do a transition between the energy in which the soil consumption will be extraordinarily high in relation to the traditional models of generation of energy, which are more concentrated. In fact, some studies in Catalonia had shown that only the 20% of the energy that is necessary will be done with renewable energy that will take advantage spaces that are purely urban. That means that the intervention of the territories will be fundamental. The decarbonization aspects, especially for mobility in urban areas or in urban areas, will be a very fundamental element in which the perspective and the dimension cannot be strictly urban, in which the territories will have a lot of importance. And finally, transitional elements, changes in the climate models will be essential, for example, to generate the work employment. The middle employment have high levels of qualities to face these challenges. Their capacities are from they have laws, they have planning capacities to plan. Also, they have the funds, they can count on some funds. And finally, they have the knowledge and the experience in the sector, in the different politics. They provide the mission of all the actors is to look for coherent sectors in which the local governments and the intermediate cities and the regions and finally the states can work in a consistent way, in a coherent way, and respecting this decentralization objectives. We have many challenges to face. How to fit the different actors independently on the political roles they have, how to provide this coherence, how to establish tools that are useful, and how to provide enough resources to each one of the different levels. I would like to organize this session in 3 parts, in which the interventions of each one of the speakers should be approximately of about 4 minutes, in which we talk about our experiences, the tools, and the difficulties in the second block, and in the third block, thinking about the future of possible challenges. So I would like to give the floor to the first speaker, first panelist. Please.
I would like to introduce our first panelist, which will be the Vice Governor of East Java, Mr. Emil Dardak. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here with us. Mr. Dardak has studied at the University of New South Wales. He's a doctor from Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University. He participated in 2018 in the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative, being the only Indonesian between the 40 mayors involved. Mr. Dardak, I would like to know a little bit more about your experience on alliances and partnerships in your region. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark, and greetings to everyone, especially to the President of the Forum of Regions of UCLG and to all the distinguished panelists, mayors, and representatives. So I think the territories which we define to be regions that allow us to connect both central government policies as well as the local context or local wisdom is going to be very important when we talk about recovering from this COVID-19 pandemic. And we all know that central government is working very hard, raising a lot of fiscal resources in order to stimulate the economy and at the same time finance the necessary health expenditures. And this is indeed something that cannot continue indefinitely, and it has to. We need to take actions and measures to ensure that there is a resilience in terms of the economic continuity of the communities. Now, as a regional government in Indonesia, we have the central government, we have the provincial government, and we have the municipalities. And some of these municipalities are predominantly rural, and there are some that are predominantly urban, which we call the cities. Some of them are metropolis, some of them are much smaller. In Indonesia, overall, we have 500 something. And in my province, in East Java, we have 40 million people, 40 million population. We have 38 municipalities, and that's the largest in Indonesia. We contribute the second largest economic volume in Indonesia, or the local GDP. And we have started in the first quarter of 2021 to basically narrow down the economic contraction. We have lessened the economic contraction consistently since the third trimester of 2020 until the first quarter of 2021, which is a good sign. Now, how do we do that? How did that happen? Of course, it's not the government alone. It's really the resilience of the people. But the fact is, indeed, central government in Indonesia, we are not allowed to raise funding from the market. So all the efforts to raise financing is done by the central government. And they do what they call as direct spending for areas or authorities that fall under the jurisdiction of ministries. But they also give us transfer payments as well. Now, the transfer payments are then provided for us to spend on items like schools, as well as infrastructure and other different expenditures, including health. Now, what happened is during the crisis, we actually experienced a decrease in the transfer payment. So most of the expenditures are being done by the central government. They increased the deficit allowance in the national budget, and some of that is financed by central bank actually buying the government securities. So a central bank actually is similar to something like quantitative easing, where central bank is bankrolling the central government. They enlarge the deficit, they spend more. Now, and then they provide us with support directly to central government payments. Now, at the worst time of at the start of the pandemic, they give a lot of transfer payments to families, and about 6 million families are given cash support. In order to allow them to at least cover their basic food needs. So it's not all the livelihoods, not all the necessities, but at least for the food. But some of that stopped at the end of the year. Only a few actually continue until now. But that actually helped the most vulnerable segment of the population to survive the worst time of the crisis. We actually observed that the urban areas were hit harder than the rural areas, because people in the rural areas are predominantly agriculture. So they can actually, and in fact, agriculture sector grew more than the other sectors. So there is actually a windfall for the agriculture sector. But for sectors like manufacturing, trade and services, and hospitality, as well as some public transportation, they all suffered, especially during the first period of the pandemic, which started around mid-March in Indonesia. But and as a result, a lot of urban unemployment take place, and some of them stay in urban areas and resulted in the increase in urban poverty. Some of them decided to go back home to their hometowns in the rural areas, which also resulted in some increase in the rural poverty. Now, what can we do as regional governments? At that time, I was tasked by the governor to design an economic program and the intervention to ensure that we can maintain the economic situation in East Java. Now, one of that is we adopt an approach where the central government basically provide transfer payments, but some of them may not receive that. For example, in the urban areas, cost of living is more, and more occupations are being affected compared to rural areas. In rural areas, cost of living is low and people are working in agriculture. They still have some basic income, but for some shop houses and some street food sellers in the cities, they basically almost lost all their income. So what we did is we supplemented to the amount of 50% of what the central government is paying to approximately 333,000 families in East Java, in the urban areas only. And we do that by actually using what we call as electronic wallet. So the central government actually disperses the payments to the families by using ATM cards. And they can redeem that by shopping in designated local shops to buy staple food. Now, we added the balance in the e-wallet. So it's very simple and very reliable and very accountable. Now, we intervene in 1 million families. The remaining 660,000 families, we actually provided a food support, and we actually gave the responsibility to the mayors for them to decide who would get that. Now, the biggest political risk that I took at that time is to actually designate a formula. Instead of just splitting the funds evenly, we work with the Statistical Bureau to see which municipality is affected more than the others. And also we want to see whether central government intervene more in certain regions than the others. We work with universities to defend the formula that we use to assign the quota for each of the municipalities. And then we came up with the formula, and we then distributed, but the specific names of who are the recipients are being done by the respective mayors. What we do is we have a big data based on population ID or citizen ID to ensure there is no double counting. So I think because you want short ones, so I think I'll end at that first for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. A little bit more than 4 minutes, but thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. I think you've been talking about tools as well. So you somehow have moved to the second segment of the section of the session. Before introducing our second panelist, I would like to welcome Emilia Saiz, who's here with us from UCLG. Emilia, hello, how are you? I'm really sorry that I didn't see you before, so it's completely my fault. I don't know if you want to address some words to all our panelists. No? Maybe later? Later? Okay. No? Okay. Can you unmute? You are muted.
Yes, no, I was
sorry.
saying I am thankful for the opportunity. I'm just enjoying the discussion, and I know that this territorial approach is revitalized now with the learnings from the pandemic. So maybe later on, Mark, when the discussions start, let us hear the rest of the panelists.
Okay. In any case, welcome and thank you for being with us. Let's move to the local governments with Jean-Marie Tetart, who's mayor of Judán, es el presidente de la Mancomunidad de Municipios de país.
Mayor of the public group. He's engineer for Icaminos, and he has had different roles in the General Council in Ibelín. He's a member of the mayors of Ibelín. Jean-Marie.
Try to stick to the time, okay? 4 minutes for you. Please, thank you. Tell us about your experience. Wait a second. You are muted, Jean-Marie. Okay. I don't know. Okay.
Très bien.
Right now.
C'est bon?
Perfect.
Oui, j'ai mis le minuteur, comme ça je ne dépasserai pas le temps. Je voudrais simplement faire l'expérience d'une petite collectivité.
I won't miss the time provided. I will just want to speak about this collectivity. I'm the president of a number of communities in a territory that has about 60, 70 square kilometers of area. We call this territorial project, and we perform different strategies for sustainable development, respecting the environment, creating employment, and also providing household. We've been promoting this initiative. And what I want to say is that the planning for and somehow governments like municipalities and
are obliged to mix these governments, the local governments, etc. And at the same time, in this construction of projects, we have to translate to the inhabitants of the territory these logistics and department logistics. We cannot impose without explaining them. The second thing I want to say is that this is indispensable to achieve all the objectives. There are different types of territories in which we can do them, and it's not the same type of questioning or negotiations that we have if it is constructed in a region or if it is discussed with another places that they could be technocratic tools or to talk with the inhabitants that I consider are citizenships as partners, and that they have a different category. You have doctors, you have agricultures, and each one of them have their particular interests. The scale in which we are what I have to reactualize in this next elections, what I proposed in my election proposal is to achieve together with the citizens during 6 years. We try to answer 10 of the challenges, like from in energy, mobility, etc. We have commitments, and as a candidate, as a mayor, I assumed that, and I promised everything to work together. The COVID crisis has changed this a bit. Everyone has their own challenges. If we talk about biodiversity, for example, I talk with agricultures or gardeners and all the associations that protect the birds, etc. But they are not national associations, they are inhabitants. The last thing I will say about my experience is that there are no negotiations in one territory. There is no data transparency. We have to have a data bank in which everyone can have access to. There is no negotiation possible if one of the parts doesn't have all the data. This is the last thing I want to say in my last 4 minutes.
That's for sure a key subject. How to share the data in order to para llegar a los mismos diagnósticos y por tanto compartir políticas. Ese es un elemento imprescindible que forma parte de las alianzas. Gracias, Jean-Marie. Me gustaría pasar
I would like to continue with the next speaker. In this case, that would be Lucy Slack.
She's the acting Secretary General of the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, and she's monitoring the regional offices in Fiji, South Africa, Ghana, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Trinidad and Tobago. She's responsible for advancing LGF's work to promote local democracy and good governance, strengthen local politics, capacity, and for implementation and support sustainable urbanization. Lucy, what's your experience on the subject? The floor is yours. Thank you. Remember, 4 minutes.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks very much, Mark, and thanks for the invitation to be part of this panel. Our organization works with cities and local governments, ministries and local government associations in 54 Commonwealth countries, and we're working on local economic development in the Caribbean, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. So I'm just going to try and draw a few lessons from that and particularly focus on some of the issues around the crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. I would say just in opening that local economic development is definitely becoming an increasing priority for local governments in the Commonwealth. And I think in many countries, or in some countries, I should say, local economic development is actually recognized as a statutory function of local government. But in many countries, it's not. So in many countries, local governments are looking at how they can use the tools and the levers that they have in their sort of powers and functions to be able to support local economic development. So thinking about how they use planning, how they use land allocation, how they use their kind of community outreach to support local economic development. I would say, and this aligns very much with the earlier speakers, that COVID-19 and the crisis that we find ourselves in the center of right now has certainly really reinforced the importance of local economic development. I think we have seen this being something that really affects communities at that territorial level. I think it's very important. I think it shone a strong light on the need for us to use our local resources effectively and efficiently to support livelihoods and to support local communities economically. And I think from a CLGF perspective, we would definitely argue that local economic development is definitely one kind of entry point into the SDGs, which our previous speakers referred to as that kind of overarching kind of framing kind of agenda to support local sort of economic, social and environmental development. And I think that, you know, local economic development was also becoming more important, not just as a result of COVID, but also in reflection of the economic slowdown in many of the countries in which we're operating. I think we need to think a lot about capacity and putting the skills into local government to be able to deal with local economic development. As I mentioned, we've been working at all different levels. We've been doing a lot of work at the kind of local level to encourage local governments to really understand their local economies, to understand the value chains that feed into their local economies, and to actually use their convening role to reach out to local communities so that collectively they can build a strategy around local economic development. And I think other speakers have also mentioned the importance of partnership in this and in making sure that we're reaching out to the obvious partners, you know, our chambers of commerce, some of our local businesses, but also recognizing the reality in many of our cities and communities that much of the economy is informal. So I think it's very important that we also find practical ways of reaching out to the informal economy. And I think that there's nothing more powerful than a local government that has actually done that analysis, has mapped and planned its local economic development strategy, because then they're very much in a position to be able to leverage resources, because local economic development by its nature is local, but we mustn't forget that it really does also drive that wider national and trade economy. So the small and micro-sized enterprises that local economic development nurtures, supports through incubation centers, through entrepreneurship training, those businesses are the businesses that really underpin our trade nationally and internationally. And I think it's very important that we locate local economic development in that wider kind of macro agenda. Local economic development, it's a process, it's not a project. I think this is something that we are increasingly learning from our members. And as I said, this critical convening role that local government plays to make sure that the whole community is engaged. And I think that it's very important to think about sort of the targeted interventions that local government can make with their existing kind of skills. We've talked about partnership, we've talked about the tools that local government has, things like ways in which some of our councils, for example, are setting up markets that are deliberately designed to support the informal traders and particularly women traders. So very micro level support that addresses the needs of particular communities in our localities, recognizing that local nature of local economic development. And then I've talked a little bit already about the coming together of different partners behind a local economic development strategy, which is very important. But then seeing that, and our communities, more importantly, seeing that impacting on the decisions that the council takes. So for example, Kitwe in Southern Africa, in Zambia, working to let a waste contract that has defined criteria by which they need to make sure particular sectors of the community are employed. So youth groups, informal workers, women-led businesses. How can local government actually use its public procurement contracts to support and really enhance local economic development? We're seeing the same kind of activities happening also in Sierra Leone, again around waste, where much of the procurement was happening previously in the capital city. Now local governments are looking to nurture and support the businesses in their own local areas. Sometimes it can be as simple as making sure that local governments have the knowledge about how those community contracts work. And then
Please,
I would
Lucy,
say the sort of final bit of this is actually coming on to the way in which local governments can then use that strategy to leverage resources and inward investment into their local economic development. So that's a little bit what we see as that cycle of local economic development.
Thank you very much, Lucy. I think there are several very interesting remarks on your intervention, specifically about the one about informality and how to address and reach out informality as a big piece of this economic potentialities that we have, and we have to recognize and to face for sure, and of course about building capacity as well at local level. That's very, very important. Thank you very much, Lucy. Let's move on to al siguiente panelista, el señor
to the next panelist, Pablo Jurado, the prefect of the province of Imbabura, the president of Consortium of the Provincial Government of Ecuador, president of the Forum of Regions of the United Cities and the local governments, and apart from that, a very important part in the organization of this event. So, Mr. President, when you wish. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon to the distance. Greetings to you, Mark. For us, it is very satisfying to have our General Secretary of CGLU, Emilia, that now she doesn't want to speak. I know you will take your time that is necessary to speak. Greetings to Antonia, also from the distance, and to our operative technique, Alicia. Of course, when we think about organizing this event or these rounds of tables, I don't know if it is round, rectangular, or squared, but anyways, it's a meeting point to analyze topics that are of the world interest, to share the experiences, the similarities and the differences that we have in each one of our countries. But the coincidences so as to show that the governance done in a multi-sectoral way in our forum, in region, in we are UCLG, we propose that it is more effective than the governments in the national level, and they understand that to address these public politics in the different levels in the provinces or in the major places, it's a strategy that is more adequate, even to rationalize investments. These allies that we always claim in the national sector, these allies are the ones that in this pandemic moment have given good results, because it is us, and this is a way that we have to insist on this, that it is us that know or what the reality is. The vision from the highest level, from the national level, not always has the certainty or is near or close to reality. That when we intervene, when I say we, I'm talking about, in this case, about regions. When the authorities in the regional level or local level, in a general way, we act, people feel a little bit more secure, safe, because they know that their own mayor knows or their government knows about the reality. And there is more closeness, and there is a better articulation among each group. The pandemic, we talked about it. We have heard our previous panelists. The pandemic has also shown the capacity of innovating, human beings' capacity to innovate. And each one of us have had different mechanisms or plans to seek for the welfare, prioritizing, of course, health. We cannot forget about the infrastructure today, and I understand that each one of you in your countries, you are living what we are facing here in Ecuador. Families are looking for rurality. People are looking for the national parks. They look for the open complexes. They look for, they want to breathe fresh air, or at least less contaminated. And we are articulated in a way, we are more connected with that perspective. But that implies as well that the national level has to take a look at the regions, because to reach rurality, even though it is not the reality that is similar or the same as what you are living in Europe or in other territories, in comparison to South America, the reality, as well as viability, we have seen lately some images from Italy, and we are a little bit envious here from Ecuador, because we would love to have a rail network as you have, to have some places where we can ride bicycles or do a competence. Here we still I will give you an example. To reach one of the highest mountains, we still have some routes. Our tourists still have to use a natural floor or sand. In Cayam Betamen, it's a mountain that is very mountain for that are receiving currently visits from tourists in their places. Those are different types of realities that make differences between the developed countries and the countries in development. Only talking about the routes, this has also generated that in our spaces we must pressure our funds to destine that to technology. We were talking with some people here, which some people previously mentioned as well, that the 65% that you mentioned is not possible without the local governments and participating in this public politics. Because you can have excellent ideas in your head, but in the territory, you won't feel the effect. At this moment, we are living in Ecuador a reality about vaccination. The vaccines, of course, managed from the ministry, have advanced in some way, in some stages. We have 2 million of people vaccinated or vaccines in comparison to the 14 million people. In 100 days, the government says that there will be 9 million people vaccinated. But the new government is also requesting for aid from the local governments and the local regions. We will use information that the Electoral Council has, in which we were providing our votes. Now we are going to go to the place where we voted. We're going to receive the vaccinations. All this because of this articulation that this national level understands that if there is no like a territory, some things will be left in the air and there will be no concrete solutions. This is the vision that we have and the experience that we have in Ecuador. Greetings to you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Of course, partnerships necessary to improve investment in order to look for impact and the greatest impact as possible. As you were saying also, the pandemic has demonstrated the importance of how to manage stress situations, both for subnational governments at the local and regional level. It's a very clear example, a very recent one also. And we are found now in a key moment from territories and from cities, which is a challenge to face now, local development. So thank you very much, Mr. President, for your intervention. And I would like to go with the next speaker. We are having some technical issues, though. I don't know if it's necessary to contact with the next speaker. I don't know if you are here with us, Mr. Tahar. Are you able to get connected? Hello?
No.
I don't think it's possible.
Creo que no va a ser posible. Bonjour. Bonjour. Bonjour.
Hello.
Bonjour, monsieur. Hola. Bonjour, monsieur. Hola.
Hola.
Vous m'entendez?
Oui.
Do you understand?
Si.
Switch on the camera.
Hola.
Hola. Well, I think we have some technical issues. I think we will try to improve the situation here. Meanwhile, let me give the floor to Emilia. Emilia, please. Now it's your turn. We have listened all our panelists. I think it's your turn to speak. My original plan, it was short interventions. I didn't succeed in that. So I think before this session ends, I would like to hear your impressions about what's your opinion.
Okay, I hope you can hear me because I wasn't allowed to. Can you hear me well?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, look, very interesting presentations. But I think we are kind of, and some of the presenters have addressed the challenge within the context of pandemic. And I think that is also something that we need to use now to develop our future narrative on how do we see the transformation of the production and consumption system within the logic of this territorial economic development. I am missing some pieces here, and I know that in the work that we have been doing within the Forum of Regions, for instance, we are putting a lot of importance in developing a notion that is not competitive but cohesion driven among the different territories. And I think that fits really well also with what you were saying, Mark, about this notion now that people are not that keen on cities anymore because they have been a very hard space from the pandemic. I think we need to help cities also reflect on what has happened and see the connections and the symbiosis that we have between cities and the rural areas, and then the power of a renewed governance among territories. So this is one aspect. I think the governance renewal is something that we need to look at also within the understanding of local economic development in general. And the second aspect that I would like to emphasize is but we probably need to also sort out a greater role on the food chain, on access to food and the food system for territories, which I think will be a very important part of the innovation that is going to be taking place towards a more sustainable green recovery. So I was wondering whether members were looking at these two aspects as well, beyond all the good practices that they are emphasizing, whether there is something that we as organized constituency should be working on, and how would that change our conversation with the other big elephant in the room, which is the private sector, which plays a very, very important role in development. So just these three issues are the ones that are concerning us more as a worldwide organization, where I think the territorial approach can play a very strong role. As you know, we are working towards the Pact for the Future, this strategy that we need to develop, and I think your inputs around here would be very interesting. So thank you for the opportunity, Mark, and congratulations to the experiences that have been presented.
Thank you very much, Emilia, for these very interesting remarks indeed. I think yes, access to food it's a key issue for sure, and specifically in this climate change crisis that we are facing for sure. I mean, it's going to be a key issue for sure. And yes, the elephant in the room, of course, the private sector. We haven't talked really much about the private sector. And when we talk about alliances, when we talk about partnerships, there's a very, very important part, which is the private sector, that it has to play a role specifically in local economic development. That's for sure. Okay, let's try to face this second and very, very short round and final round. So please try to stick to the time. And I would like to ask you about the main challenges that we face for the future. So we could start all the way around. I mean, we could start from probably señor Pablo Jurado, presidente del Fórum de las Regiones de Congope. Presidente, ¿está con nosotros?
Are you here with us, Pablo Jurado? I was not ready. My intervention to be the first one, I was not ready. But you are bad, Mark. I had my breakfast on the table. I was having breakfast, just having breakfast. You have already had lunch. First of all, I would like to highlight a very clear vision that Emilia has. And in that sense, my dear Emilia, we have been centered on in strengthening the relationships, of course, in this regional forum. As we were discussing days ago, defending the legality of our forum, because at the beginning, you may have misunderstood that we are intruding in SG. It's not that we are not participating here. We have, of course, our regulations. We have a statutes to follow, and in the same way, and laws, and we are legitimate. And what Emilia was saying, and we will never stop manifesting, we are not competing among levels. We complement each other and we articulate each other. The truth is that in each country, you have a regulation or a different legislation. In Ecuador, because I will always talk about my experience from Ecuador, in the case of Ecuador, we are told our own constitution that Ecuador is a territory that is administered in a participatory way. And when we talk about a participatory way, in our country, we have models to build the funds, doing assemblies. In the case of municipalities or regions, we can have different names. In my case, in Imbadura, as I was telling you, that you are invited. We are near Quito. I am in Quito. You are invited there. I left my city at 5 a.m. and at 7 in Quito, 2 hours from my place, we have the provincial parliament, the citizenship participation, and this incorporates representatives from the civil society. You have artisans, you have small companies, you have agriculture people, people that are worried about the rails, the environment, the productive fomentation, our competencies here. And there we have, we have identified the production forum, the environment forum, and that are created through an law, and they accompany us to do a follow-up of what we are doing well, what we are not doing well. In this in an articulate way, our General Secretary, we give important steps towards that objective, for which this forum was created, the regional forum. And in honor to the time that you have allotted to me, I think I have spoken more than 3 minutes. I would like to share this experience and practice that we carry out in our country. Of course, there are different other models in other countries. I always highlight as well that the national level is probably, in the political aspect, a little bit more jealous, as I told Joy Arrasha. You can see Johnny as a potential candidate for the Republic because he is a mayor in a city. So the government or the president is a little bit scared not to provide the support to that government level, thinking about the following elections. And for me, that effect of politician has to start disappearing slowly and forever. And we must pressure from our territories not to be seen as enemies, but to be seen as strategic allies. And that's actually what we really are.
Sin duda, sin duda.
Of course, we need to present each other as strategic allies. We need to entice people to stop with this potential threat that you were just explaining to us. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry I changed your plans. I didn't want to leave you last in your intervention, but thank you very much.
Let's move to Lucy. Now, Lucy, in your opinion, what are the main challenges for the future?
I'd like to just make 3 very, very quick points, and I'd also like to pick up on the point that Emilia made. So the first is really the issue around decentralization and governance. I think that local economic development is a way of strengthening governance. I think we're seeing local economic development as a very positive way for mayors to genuinely kind of lead their communities in the crisis, of course, but also aside from the crisis. I think we're also seeing that local economic development is helping us to drive in a more positive way the decentralization agenda, because we're genuinely understanding where powers and functions need to be decentralized to the local level. And I think embedded in that is also issues around the kind of resourcing agenda. So I would say that that kind of whole framework around governance is something which is genuinely strengthened by local economic development. And I would say that local economic development definitely benefits from having some kind of national framework, national guidelines to make sure that it's something that happens across the country. I want to then just talk quickly about the private sector, because as colleagues have definitely identified, the private sector is an important partner. And I think we need to keep the private sector in our local economic development planning and strategizing. It's not separate from the private sector. The private sector has to be a partner in that. But we also need to remember that the private sector is also potentially a source of revenue into the local the delivery of those local economic development plans that our local governments are developing. And I think that a big area of capacity need in local government is to be able to exploit that access to external resources, whether that's from other ministries, whether that's developmental finance, or whether that's funding from the private sector. And I think understanding how to package programs and projects and then to be able to leverage resources is a big priority area for local government. And the final point I just wanted to touch on is this issue around complementarity and competition. I think that one of the things I would say is that part of this whole exercise has to be about understanding our local economies better, understanding those value chains. And that's where we pick up issues around the agricultural sector. That's how we include, the food supply issues, food security issues into our local economic development planning. But there's also, I think, a role for local government associations in actually helping to kind of manage that we don't create competition between local governments in our countries. A country like, for example, New Zealand, they've taken a kind of an agreement within their local government association not to compete directly for that inward investment. So you don't automatically have a company and then you offer them better terms to move to your area. That they have a kind of a protocol as a local government association to protect against that and to look at ways in which they can come together. And my final point is around this issue of local economic development being integrated into post-COVID recovery and thinking about the level that local actually is, because we're increasingly seeing in some countries that it's not at the city level, it's not at the local government level, it's actually, as previous speakers have said, at the regional level. So I think there's also a debate to be had there. So those are just my short points to keep you on time.
Thank you for your 2 cents and being very short. Thank you so much. Yo creo que Emilia ya lo decía, ya lo comentó.
I think that Emilia has already said this. She talks about interdependency and not to compete, but to cooperate. I think that in that sense, it's important as well to have this more territorial vision, to have the strengths of each zone so that to cooperate in a coherent way towards the objectives of development. I think in that sense, when we talk about the dimension in the perspectives in the territory, we also take this into consideration. Thank you very much, Lucy.
Let's move to our next speaker, Jean-Marie. What's your reaction to all what we are discussing? Thank you. Please try to be short. Okay, I'm muting.
C'est bon?
Good.
Oui.
Perfect.
Je pense que,
Okay, I think that there will never be a development without a territorial development. But we have different levels. When we talk about water, transportation, biodiversity, they are not the same territories. We don't have the same scales of territory. The second point is that we have coherence, at least between the regional level and in local level from the municipalities. And it must include a governability pact in which the regions are represented. This must be supported by objective data from the territory. It is necessary to have open data about the elements about economic activities, because there is no negotiation, there is no division without the partners to have the same type of data. I also think that we must train the actors to train them to negotiate territory agreements. And then we need a pact so that the collectivities are in a different way obliged to launch a territorial project so that it can be an obligatory competence.
Et ça devrait être une obligation parce que c'est la base de tout le travail. Et il n'y aura pas d'atteinte des objectifs du développement durable sans que ça se fasse au niveau des territoires. Les grands principes peuvent se décliner au niveau global, mais la réussite ne se fera qu'au niveau des territoires, et je pense sur la base que je viens d'indiquer. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. I don't know if we are having some troubles with the translation. I don't know if you had some issues. In any case, I would think we will try to solve it. Thank you, Jean-Marie. It's the second time I hear you talk about scale, which is for me very interesting concept. because mainly because I'm an architect. And the concept of scale for me it's very important. But of course, when we are addressing policies, the matter of scale is very important. Thank you for bringing this out. And finally, we could hear the Vice Governor of Java, Mr. Dardak. The floor is yours. Please try to be short. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's great to have heard a lot of very great insights from all the different speakers coming from different institutions, issues like fiscal governance, even food sovereignty and so on, and scale. I think because I'm speaking on behalf of a government that is, sandwiched between central and local government, I think this facilitation role is becoming very important. Your question is, what is the future challenge? But I think the challenge is already happening now. We're in the midst of COVID, and we're trying really hard to see what we can do to reactivate the economy. Definitely, local governments don't have a lot of room to actually borrow money and generate fiscal resources to do some short-term expenditures or stimulus. So it's really the hands-on approach that is important. At the municipalities, I think building synergies between different municipalities is very important. Making sure that we help each other, that city, municipality A and municipality B and C, they all are working together to support each other, because we know that international trade is being encumbered right now with the logistical challenges. And therefore, that role of facilitation becomes really important for territorial government to play during this time. And finally, I think it is important to also, look into issues like rural-urban linkages. Are we going to see people moving back to cities, or are we going to create more opportunities in the rural areas going forward because of the improved digitization of the economy? That it is no longer that imperative for somebody to succeed and having to live in cities. So this will create a future challenge, to answer your question, in terms of the paradigm of urban planning. And whether issues like retail location, where do we locate services, where do we build the infrastructure? The post-COVID economy is an economy or a community that witnesses an accelerated transition of what has been the prophecy of the past. Everybody looked at the prophecy of digitization, Industry 4.0. COVID simply accelerates. It kills many businesses that were already struggling neck to neck. They are killed already because of the COVID to never reopen. So I think the future challenge is to really distinguish between those that temporarily have to shut down or those that will permanently shut down and need to be reassigned. So that I think is also a very important issue for Secretary General Emilia to discuss outside the Forum of Regions as well within the platform of UCLG. I hope I didn't take too long. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you very much for these interesting remarks. I liked very much this sandwich concept. We sometimes feel the same way in regional governments. We are like in the middle of this very heavy layers that are there are the states and cities, of course, with a lot of power, and that's understandable. But I think it's good to be somehow in the middle. It's good. You can talk both ways, huh? So you can strengthen alliances, and of course about digitalization. I think this is as well a key issue. It's an excellent remark. COVID has been indeed an accelerator to digitalization, and this somehow will transform our economy for sure, and how cities and territories will react in this new paradigm. It will be crucial. It will be paramount. So thank you very much for your wise comments. I would like to finish with one sentence, just one sentence for all of yours, of the panelists. Sorry. And I'm including Emilia as well, so you have some homework, Emilia. That how will you enhance, cómo impulsarían?
How you're going to prosper the economical development in your territories? How
you enhance the economic development in your territories? Can you try to just give us an answer with simple sentence? Is that even possible? Who wants to start? ¿Quién quiere ser el primero?
Who would like to start?
Nobody? Okay, then I will start with the president of Congope, Pablo Jurado. Una frase. ¿Cómo desarrollaríamos?
Bueno, muchas gracias. Como estamos hablando de
Well, thank you very much. As we were just speaking about territorialization, I will just say that together, the different levels of government, we can articulate with each other and generate development in each of our territories. Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Lucy.
I would just say by continuing to prioritize local economic development as something that local governments need to be at the forefront of.
Okay, thank you very much. Short and sweet. Jean-Marie. Jean-Marie, can you hear us? You are muted.
Oui, écoutez, j'ai mis les défis des objectifs de développement durable.
Before this challenge of helping rural sectors during my electoral campaign, I still have 5 more years within my administration, so I don't have any other solution than to continue working in this sense. Thank you very much.
Hi, can you hear us? The Vice Governor?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, I didn't hear you. Okay, just one sentence. I think I like the video which says that competent and cohesive and connected territorial governments will be unstoppable. I don't have a lot of creative ideas, so I'd like to quote that and remind all of us that that video was played so many times to remind us that we all need to be competent, cohesive, and connected. Thank you.
That was the idea, to repeat the video, to Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to ask as well to our other panelists that unfortunately couldn't be with us in the camera because of technical issues. Tahar, are you with us? Can you hear us? Can you just try to give us a sentence on how to improve, how to enhance the local economic development? Can you hear us? Tahar, are you with us? I don't know, probably we still have some issues. Can you hear us, Tahar?
Bonjour. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Bien sûr, je vous entends, monsieur. Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Can you hear us?
Oui, oui, oui. We can hear
Très
you.
bien.
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Allô, bonjour.
Good morning.
Allez-y, messieurs, c'est à vous la parole.
Alors, bon, voilà.
Yes, sir, it's your turn to speak.
Merci de participer,
Okay, then thank you.
chance de participer avec
Thank you for giving me this chance to be here with you today
j'ai entendu que vous avez
in this
échangé
roundtable during the forum.
Nous sommes
You
dans la région
exchanged
Tétouan.
really interesting information today. We are in the region of Tetouan. I'm going to speak about this.
Cette approche territoriale à laquelle
I want to speak about this territorial approach you all spoke about.
territorial
And about this, I just can say that territorial development is very important in Morocco, in our region,
travailler dans ces
which worked
à travers les contrats programmes
for the territorial administration of Tetouan.
d'action sectorielle et des transferts de compétences avec des ressources propres.
In different territorial division projects, I would like to speak about renewable development, which is part of new projects in our development scheme and also constitutes a measure to develop different strategies at the regional level. These strategic measures are articulated and fixed in different manners. And it's very important for our region. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for this chance to speak about this post-COVID pandemic crisis, which gave us a chance to work and help our population, the most vulnerable population that was more harshly affected, and help it be strengthened. Unfortunately, I didn't have as much time to tell you about our experience. We are still working for our renewable development goals, and these are objectives that are very prominent in our both national and international programs. We are ready to respect them, and it's always within our plans. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Al-Hanin. I'm really sorry that we couldn't have this. We had these technical issues. I hope the next time we can hear you more about this renewable strategy. Thank you anyway. And I'd like to move to Emilia, where we're trying to have this strong sentence about how to enhance local economic development. The floor is yours, Emilia.
Sí, Marc, muchas gracias. Yo quisiera ser un poco provocadora acá porque la verdad es que yo no tengo el conocimiento.
I would like to, because I haven't had the chance to get to know the experience of every one of the speakers. They are the main actors in this situation, but from my place and from where also Lucy's place, we can have maybe a more global experience. And I think we have a very important challenge ahead of us for territories to be able to play an important role in this economic and also social development. I think we need to make the citizenship fall back in love with territories. And to achieve this, even with territories that they do not identify with, we have to be realistic about this. In some cases, in our world, many citizens do not identify with territorial divisions. They don't know, they see this as very abstract. And to make them fall back in love with these territories, understanding them as different symbiotic nexus and links. We need to make a focus on proximity approaches. It doesn't mean, of course, that we do not want to benefit from global aspects of development, but it means that we will imply and apply a very digital and technological development strategies to improve a situation that started when the economic environment changed already in 2008. For this, it's very important to be a step ahead of everything, to strengthen those roots in proximity, empathy, and care, so that communities can identify with what they produce, with what they consume, and with whatever creates life and improvements. I will leave it at that, but I was just speaking with the union workers and staff, and my mind is blown with all the ideas that we were speaking about. I think we need to fall back in love with territories. And thank you very much for your patience, Mark. It's been a pleasure, honestly. In part, I agree with you, and in some other ways I don't. But it's true that territories that need to get projected and communicate, and also even so that you want to appreciate this territory aspect, understand their mission and their value, and to be able to project that is truly fundamental. It's one of our challenges, the ones that have to do with how to express that from territories. It's not just another aspect of this fabric. They are very important. First, one of the main actors for local and social economic development. And also it's part of this role that we were speaking about of being an intermediary between global plans and territorial action in cities, in neighborhoods, in the streets even. So that part is actually very crucial from my perspective. And I think that all of us, and from UCGLL, and with the help of everyone here and your team too, we will be able to project that. There's another aspect, the digitalization aspect that you just mentioned, that has to do with many aspects, especially marketing. And I think that's very important. It's a race. And if different governments don't have the tools to hop on this race, they will be left behind, because it doesn't have only to do with access to key aspects, but also because many of these solutions will be based in digitalization, 5G, and a lot of resources that will be crucial for economic development. But I also think that territories are in the risk of being left behind if they don't have that goal already planned. So
it has been a very, very interesting session. Let me remind you that we at the Forum of Regions are working on these three different groups of regions trying to enhance the regional perspective, the territorial perspective on urban development. I would like you to look for more information in that subject. We, as you have seen in the video in the session, the beginning of the session, we would like to have more connected, cohesive, and competitive territories, because we all together are unstoppable. So thank you very much for being here with us, and see you next time. Goodbye.